What is going on, you guys, and welcome to the top 5 games of 2018. Now, I still have a few months before I'm considered late with this year's list, so let's just go ahead and get this one done. Kicking us off at number 5, we have a game, or should I say, game series that I honestly never thought would make it all the way to a Game of the Year list. Especially given how void of content and demo feeling the last couple years of installments have been. I'm talking about WWE 2K19. So if you want a game that has got content up the wazoo, look no further than this game, because it has everything. It has your universe and your creation modes. It has a showcase mode, which deals with sort of the rise and fall of Daniel Bryan. Now, admittedly, I would have preferred if this showcase was a little bit longer. It didn't take me any time at all to run through it. But I definitely have to say that the showcase was playing second fiddle to the My Career mode this year. And when I say My Career mode, I don't mean that pointless bullcrap where you create a character and you wander around the backstage area and fight the same guys over and over and over again until you hopefully end up the number one contender for a championship. My Career mode is an honest My Career mode this year with an actual story where you create a character that is part of an indie promotion that gets called up to WWE. You have a feud with Triple H, among other things, and end up in the main event of WrestleMania. It goes exactly the way that you would imagine a story-driven career to go, and it's great. If all that isn't enough for you, though, WWE 2K19 introduces a new mode this year called the Challenge Towers, I believe. And yes, when you hear Challenge Towers, you're probably thinking like the ones from Mortal Kombat. That is exactly what it is, more or less. And I was quite pleasantly surprised to see that something from Mortal Kombat fit very well into a wrestling game, and it ended up to be a lot of fun. So I am very pleased to give this game the 5th spot on the list and a solid 8 out of 10. And WWE 2K, if either of you see this, which is very doubtful, this is exactly how you make a wrestling game. This is exactly the wrestling game that we want. Now, I haven't done too much research on 2K20 yet. But so far, from what I've seen and what I've heard, you guys are on the right track with that. But you guys, the audience, are going to have to wait till this year's list comes out to see just how it stacks up. So number 4 is Detroit Become Human. Now, I want you guys to think of a not so distant future where a company called CyberLife has created androids to essentially make humans' life, our life, easier. Now, these androids are made to do pretty much any job that you can think of, any job that humans can do. And when I say jobs, I mean literally anything from firefighters and policemen to store clerks and strippers. Literally anything that humans could do, these androids are programmed to do. And that is the only thing that they are programmed to do. Their entire existence revolves around doing whatever their job is. And they can't really do anything else. So when you think about that future, you might say, wow, that sounds a lot like a utopia. It sounds great. Sign me up. But this game kind of drops you off in a world that is filled with civil unrest. The humans are unhappy with androids. They don't like androids because they are taking all the humans' jobs. They're doing everything that we could do, and essentially humans are becoming obsolete. Not only that, but there has been kind of an increasing number of androids called deviants, which are those who kind of have overthrown their programming to be able to kind of snap out of their purpose and do whatever they want. So in this game, you play as 3 different androids. You play as Kara, who is a caretaker for a young girl named Alice, who and Kara ends up deviating from her programming because she feels that Alice is not safe and they need to escape the clutches of her abusive drug addict father. So she deviates from her programming. They end up leaving the house and running away to safety. You play as Marcus, who is a caretaker for an elderly artist named Carl, who deviates from his programming when he gets into a fight with his mooch of a son. Things go awry, and he feels the need to essentially run away. And you play as Connor, who is employed by CyberLife to work with the Detroit Police Department to solve different cases, catch deviants, and figure out why kind of these deviants are popping up and going rogue all over the place. Why they are becoming deviants and how they are able to overflow their programming and do whatever they want. And what makes this game great is just how the 3 different stories, which are completely different, kind of intertwine, and how 3 separate journeys can combine into basically one ending, which is essentially the uprising of androids as a separate race, I guess. And I hope that's not a spoiler, because I think that's kind of how it goes. No matter how you play, the difference is just how it turns out, which I'm not going to spoil at all. But essentially, yeah, the 3 different characters all have stories that intertwine and kind of lead toward kind of an android versus human type thing, maybe, if you play it a certain way. But yeah, it's just great. Definitely a lot of replayability there, to see how things are shaped and how things turn out. And you definitely, at least me personally, I love this game because it made me care about what happened to each of the characters. And all I'm going to say about the ending, my ending, is that I kind of wish some things turned out differently. But at the end of the day, I was pretty happy with it. But like I said, there's a lot of replayability there. And I think it's a game that after a while I could definitely jump back into. So I'm going to give Detroit Become Human number 4 on this list, a solid 9 out of 10. One for being a solid game, and anybody that's played this game will understand when I say Hostess Chloe. Definitely a 9 out of 10 for one of the best main menu screens and best characters that I've ever come across. So that is Detroit Become Human. Coming in at number 3, the halfway point of our list, we have Spider-Man. Now, I have to admit that while I totally agree with the idea that he has some of the best villains and most memorable villains in all of Marvel, I have never really been a Spider-Man fan until this game, because this game is awesome. The best way that I can describe it, and probably the simplest way that I can describe it, is basically you take something like Arkham Asylum or Arkham City, and it's Spider-Man. All the bad guys are there just causing a ruckus, and, you know, like I said, it's Arkham City with Spider-Man. And there's two main things that I just adore about this game. The first being that it's not your typical Spider-Man story. I think every Spider-Man game that I have ever played deals around the same thing. He gets his powers, he's figuring out his powers, his Uncle Ben dies, there's this like spirit of vengeance type thing going on, I don't know. They all kind of revolve around the same beaten horse of a story, an origin story. This does not do that. This is placed in the future, a couple of years after Ben dies. Aunt May is working at like a homeless shelter. Peter and MJ have kind of broken up. Harry's doing his thing, which I won't spoil. Peter is out of high school and working for Dr. Octavius. Mr. Osborn is now the mayor of the city, the mayor of New York, while simultaneously the head of Oscorp, and it all works very, very well to kind of create a familiar story, but yet a story that is its own. And I think that's why I love it so much, is because it was familiar, because we all know what happens to Spider-Man. We all know how his origin story pans out. So it was familiar, but also a story of its own, and that was very exciting for me to get to experience. The other thing that I love about this game is the city itself. The map itself does a pretty decent job of feeling very big, because you kind of have, I don't know much about New York, so I don't know if it's like an accurate map of New York, the entire city itself, but you have essentially what is supposed to be the city of New York in maybe its entirety or a pretty good chunk of it. And it feels very big and very sprawling with all of the buildings and stuff. But one of the things that I love, the other thing that I love about this game, is the speed in which you can navigate this. You know, it feels very big, kind of intimidating, kind of feels like it's easy to get lost in, but just the way that Spidey can navigate it and the speed that he can do so with is just great. You know, the web slinging, his movements, everything feels pretty natural, everything feels pretty great, and it doesn't take any time at all to gain any sort of speed, and it makes it pretty fun to navigate the city and do like side missions and collectibles and things like that, which I did pretty much everything that I could, which is surprising for me because normally I don't do that sort of thing, but I had a lot of fun being Spider-Man and flying, web slinging around New York City. So that is why I'm going to give this game the first perfect score of 10 out of 10 on this list and say that I am very, very excited for this sequel. Number 2 is Red Dead Redemption 2. Now, this game is a prequel to the first one, which puts you in the shoes of excuse me, Arthur Morgan, who is a member alongside the original protagonist of John Marston. They are members of the Dutch Van der Linde gang. Anybody that has played the first game will know exactly what I'm talking about. But this game puts you in the period of history where essentially outlaws and gunslingers are starting to die out. You know, the West is changing. It's getting more cultivated, more civilized. And the idea of these massive outlaw gangs that rob trains and murder and stuff and live their life on the run is kind of coming to an end. So this is a very heavy game because it starts off with the gang, the Dutch Van der Linde gang, having a massive bank job go wrong, which leads to them being chased by the Pinkertons, and essentially, they're doing their best to remain free and escape the law, if you will. And like I said, it's extremely heavy. There's just a lot of story there, a lot of character development that happens in this game that I'm not going to be able to cover here. But one of the things that I love is just the main character. Well, really everybody, because Dutch kind of feels the same thing too. He's just not willing to admit it. But the main character is really, starting to realize that times are changing. Times of the outlaws and the gunslingers and all this, running around and living free is coming to an end, and if we're lucky enough to survive this, which isn't very likely because literally everybody and their brother is trying to kill us and run us down. But if we're lucky to survive this, this is the only life that we know. So what's going to happen when we, go our separate ways and have to live a very civilized, cultured life? I'm not sure if I can do that. So that's one aspect. And the other one is, I'm going to try not to spoil it, but something happens to Arthur's personal life, in his personal life, where he also basically has to come to terms with some of the terrible things that he's done. Like I've robbed, I've killed, I've done this, I've done that, all terrible things. And I'm now becoming afraid of, can I undo this? Can I be a better person? And essentially, what is going to happen to me when I die? Because literally death just seems to be around every corner. And if they can't escape to live life, if they can't escape to live another day, that is literally what's going to happen to them, is they are going to die. And they've got to come to grips with the reality of they are pretty terrible people. I'm not going to say entirely, because they do have good moments, but they are outlaws. They do rob, they do kill, they do this and that and everything else that you would expect them to do. And it just creates, a very intense story where I found myself hoping for the best for literally everybody. I was hoping that things were going to turn out well. That's all I'm going to say about it. If you haven't played it yourself, you definitely want to play it. And I'm just going to kind of end this segment, the number 2 spot, with giving this another perfect 10 out of 10 score. Play it if you haven't. Any game that can make me cry at the end deserves a spot on my Game of the Year list. So let's do a quick recap here before we get to number 1. 5 is WWE 2K19, much to my surprise. 4 is Detroit Become Human. 3 is Marvel's Spider-Man. 2 is Red Dead Redemption 2, which leaves the number 1 spot and my Game of the Year for none other. I'm pretty sure everybody else has guessed it. If Red Dead Redemption 2 came in at the 2nd spot, I'm pretty sure everybody knows by now that my Game of the Year is none other than God of War 2018. I'm just going to cut to the chase here and say that this game, of course, is a 10 out of 10. Our third 10 out of 10 game on this list. But let me explain to you why I think that this game is a near perfect game. Or at least a perfect game to me. Excuse me, let me wet my whistle here. Pardon me. So God of War is a perfect game to me for 2 reasons. Number 1, the world that it takes place in. I have said before, I believe, when I've talked about God of War and why I like it so much, that mythology is one of my favorite things in the world. And my mythology class in college was one of my more memorable experiences in college. So here we are in the Norse world, which is in stark contrast to the very linear world of Greece that the other ones introduce you to. The thing about the other God of Wars is I feel like the world only lets you see what it wants you to see. And that's something that I guess if there's one thing that I've never really liked about those games, it's that. Because the world of Greece itself is so steeped in lore and stories and characters and creatures, and they just kind of don't let you experience that. This God of War is completely different. This one is an open, breathing, living world that just lets you experience it and explore And it was great for me because I still remember quite a bit about Norse mythology from my college class, so I went into it with a little bit of knowledge. And this was just an experience, an opportunity to grow that knowledge and expand on what I already knew. And there's just so much there. Literally everything, you know, lives and breathes on its own. Everything from the trees to the rivers to the creatures to the people, they all are there to coexist in this beautiful Norse world. And the only thing that I really wanted to do was explore every nook and cranny, explore every little bit of story, every bit of lore, and figure out how literally everything, coexists and how everything has a purpose. And it was just great to experience that. And anybody that loves to explore open world games is going to, to love this. Whether or not you love mythology the same way that I do, I think this is a world that you are just going to become entranced in and just want to explore regardless of how you feel about mythology itself. So the world itself, the living, breathing world of Norse mythology that this game provides is just one reason why I love it. The other main reason is the character development. Because this is a God of War that's perfect for anybody. If you're worried about, I've never played any of the other games before. I don't know if I can play this one. Do I need to go back and play the other ones before I get to this one? It would, excuse me, it would help. I'm not gonna lie and say you don't need to, but you don't need to at the same time. You can if you want, but you don't need to, because this one is kind of they call it a soft reboot from the rest in the series. And, it's very comfortable and very welcoming to those of you that are not familiar with Kratos' story, not familiar with the other God of War games. And if you're one of those people, let me just tell you that you are going to be introduced to a man that is obviously hiding something. He is obviously doing his best and struggling to live a very different life. Now, you're probably not going to know why, being that you've never experienced Kratos before. You might be able to figure it out by the end of the game. And I'm going to spoil that in a minute. But yeah, he's just a very, he's a complex character. And you can just feel that he's hiding something. He's adjusting to the idea of being alone. A father to his son, something that he's never really had to be before. And if you're a veteran of the series, you're going to understand exactly what it is that he's struggling to keep secret, and why he's trying to hide and fit into his new role as the dad, as the person Kratos. And this is where kind of the spoiler comes in, so if you haven't played God of War and you want to, you probably want to stop the video right here. Thanks for watching. And if And if the rest of you don't really care, let me just say that one of the things that makes this game great, in relation to the subject of character development, is just the emotional ride that this game takes you on. Because he's trying desperately to change his ways to not be the Kratos that kills gods. You know, he doesn't want to be... He's trying to outrun who he is and what he's done. And it seems for, you know, however many years it has been since the last God of War game, it seems to have worked until it doesn't. You know, and by the end of the game, he explains to his son that he is somebody who slaughters gods. He hates gods. And he doesn't really want to do it anymore, but he basically tells his son that there's just times where we gotta fight. We have to. And it's that character development of Kratos and the bond between his son and kind of the trying to outrun who he is and what he's done in the past, and then coming to terms with he can outrun it. He is who he is. He can't change it. And basically he's teaching his son now that, you know, you just gotta own who you are, and even though killing gods and killing people isn't right, sometimes you just gotta do it. Because you get screwed over, or you get painted into a corner where literally the only thing left to do is fight your way out. And it's just that experience with the characters that I love so much. With Kratos, with his son Atreus, I think his name is. So you combine the two things, you combine the character development and kind of the emotional ride that Kratos and his son are going through with this living, breathing world that is rich with lore and kind of behind-the-scenes story that you can explore at your own leisure. And that is why God of War 2018 is a near perfect game to me, and definitely deserves to be my game of the year. So again, before I go, quick recap of my game of the year list for 2018. Number 5 is WWE 2K19. 4, Detroit Become Human. 3, Spider-Man. 2, Red Dead Redemption 2. And coming in at number 1, my game of the year for 2018 is God of War. We'll see you guys next time, definitely for the next game of the year list. See you around.